Good evening. Is this thing on? Always the first question, right? My name is Vivek Chaudhary, and I'm Dean of the Daniels College of Business. Thank you for joining us for Voices of Experience today. We are delighted to be bringing back this signature series. So thank you again for taking the time to be with us, especially in this rather un-Colorado-like day with the rain. And I think people are probably still trying to find parking and navigate the rain, so hopefully they'll continue to join us as we go along. So our conversation today is at the intersection of two things that I know we're all very interested in. The first is this thing called AI. Ever since its introduction, generative AI has captured our imaginations. By the way, may I say that ChatGPT has no role in today's conversation. Just putting it out there. And for good reason too. McKinsey predicts that AI could add between $2.6 and $4.4 trillion in value annually. And of course, we're all aware that it can redefine the way we work, live, and play. All this is positive. Yet, I know that many of us are understandably also concerned about the potential negative effects of AI and the effects that do need to be managed through policies, through actions, and through ethical decision-making. The second issue that we are all very interested in is the set of challenges and opportunities faced by our city. And so I'm delighted today to have with us four wonderful panelists and city leaders that will share with us how the city of Denver is using technology, and in particular AI, to address these challenges and opportunities. But before I welcome and introduce our panel, I want to thank US Bank for sponsoring Voices of Experience. Voices of Experience would not be possible without their support and sustained support over many years, so we are grateful. And we have many guests from US Bank here in the audience today, so please join me in giving them a big round of applause for their sponsorship. This session is also being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Voices of Experience website in the near future. Now, I am delighted to introduce our panel. First, I'd like to welcome Suma Nalapati. Suma is the Chief Information Officer for the City and County of Denver. She's an experienced digital transformation-focused CIO with a career spanning more than 25 years. Her work includes enhancing client and resident omni-channel experiences, expanding data and digital capabilities, building and leading global teams, and optimizing IT operations and cybersecurity across both the public and private sectors. Previous to her role at the city, Suma served as Global CIO at Insight and Chief Digital Officer at both Dish Network and Everbridge. She has also held positions at Teletech, Catholic Health Initiatives, and the state of Colorado. Suma is also fiercely passionate about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the technology industry. She has worked with the Blind Institute of Technology, Lady Coders, and Women in STEM, and was named among the top 50 most powerful women in technology by the National Diversity Council. She holds a master's degree in nuclear physics and also Kellogg's Chief Digital Officer certification. Thank you, Suma, for joining us today. Next, please welcome Jeff Dolan, Chief Strategy Officer and Counsel for the City and County of Denver. Jeff is responsible for advancing the vision and shaping the strategy of the mayor and his office on key initiatives. Prior to joining the mayor's office, Jeff served as Vice President of External Affairs at Comcast's Mountain West region. He oversaw the company's government relations and public-private partnerships. Before that, Jeff was an attorney involved in political strategy roles in Washington, D.C. Jeff is also an alum of the University of Denver's Sturm College of Law. Welcome, Jeff, and thank you. Next, Al Gardner is the Executive Director of the City and County of Denver's Department of General Services. His illustrious career spans 3 decades and is marked by visionary leadership, strategic management, and community engagement. Gardner's notable accomplishments include leading Denver-based startup hospitality company Inspirato to a successful IPO in 2022. Al is deeply committed to his community, actively participating in several citywide boards and commissions, including the Denver African American Commission, the Denver Citizens Oversight Board, Denver Civil Service Commission Board, Denver Police Department Chiefs Advisory Board, and the Denver Sheriff's Advisory Board. He also serves as a board member of the Colorado Technology Association. Al holds both a bachelor's and a master's degree in business administration, and thankfully for us, teaches information and communications technology as an adjunct at the University of Denver's University College. Thank you, Al, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have Daniels alum, Adeeb Khan, Executive Director of Denver Economic Development and Opportunity. Adeeb is a social impact leader and corporate responsibility executive with a proven track record of advancing equity and opportunity. He is formerly the Chief Brand and Impact Officer for Delta Dental of Colorado, and before that, he was the Senior Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at TIAA. He has also served as Senior Director of Volunteer Engagement at Mile High United Way, where he launched and expanded the Colorado Reading Corps. Adeeb also serves on the Daniels Executive Advisory Board, and we are grateful to have him. So please welcome Adeeb. Thank you for being here. So before we dive into the conversation, I wanted to give you just a quick flavor of the structure that we are planning for today. Well, we're going to talk about the technology and AI and how the city is using that. We're going to start with Al and Jeff sort of laying the groundwork and providing the context for what we're going to be discussing. And we're going to turn to Suma, who's going to talk a little bit about what we are already doing with technology. And then with Suma's permission, we're going to try and imagine the future of where we could be going with this technology. And then we're going to come to Adeeb and talk about the economic development implications of AI technology and all of the issues that we've been discussing and how this gets reflected in the city's economic development strategy. So again, thank you to the panel for being here. So Al and Jeff, I'm going to start off by asking you, by sharing with us some of the most important issues and challenges facing the city today. And in discussing those, I know that the things that will immediately come to mind for all of us in the audience are things like immigration and housing affordability and infrastructure. But I'd like you to start before that with the daily interaction that the residents of this city have with the city, what some of the issues are, what your priorities are, and how you're approaching improving those operations and challenges.
I would defer to the literal rocket scientist up here to answer this question. No, it's a great question. I think one thing that the Mayor Mike Johnson has done well is to take a look at those things that are impacting us on a daily basis, right, to your point. And to that end, I think one thing we've done as a city by the use of what we've called Tiger Teams, which is a NASA concept that he's introduced to the way that we approach it, is trying to take a data-driven approach to decision-making. And when we say that, we can take a look at how long, and there was a lot of talk about this during the election, how long it takes to process licensing or permits, right? So how do we fix that from a very real perspective, not just moving one widget to the next to say this is a fix, but really diving down deep to take a look at the website. To take a look at how many folks are calling 311, which is the number that citizens call to either say that they're having a problem or get information about that. What we've done is take a look at that data, analyze it just to see how many folks are calling repeat about the same thing, how many are original calls, and really dissecting that information then to shape how the website addresses those particular different concerns. So that's one of them, licensing. How do we move it forward? We can take another example of your solid waste, of the trash cans. Most of the time, some of us have had multiple different sizes of trash cans and the different ones. Some folks don't know that there's an additional day that the solid waste comes by and tries to redump the trash, but how many times is that missed? So we are really delving down into the things on the level that impact Denver citizens on a daily basis. And we're doing it through that method, through really digging beneath the surface to find out the patterns that exist.
So licensing,
Licensing,
waste, any
solid
other
waste.
issues?
Oh yeah, I could go. It's a big list. I don't know if we
We'll
have
take
the
one
time.
more example.
I'll give you one more example. Another one that we're looking very, very, very closely at is how, and Suma's going to talk about this later, is the interaction with 311, the interaction of how your issue is being addressed. Sometimes you can call 311 and there may be some frustration that you're not going to the right person. At that point is where AI, our new tool, will get involved and really do that predictive analytics and try to guide you to the correct different agency that can help you with that problem. But we're doing it in a way, there again, looking at volume, because all of us know and hear at some level that data is not necessarily information. And there's a difference between data and information. And what we're trying to do is distill down to take the data to make it information, to make it then a process. And we're starting with those three. And those are the three that really jump out to me the most. And I have plenty more that I can discuss, but those are the three that jump out.
Yeah, we'll probably get to some more of
I'm
those.
sure we will.
But in our prep call, you mentioned something that I haven't seen too often in the context of interaction with a government agency or with a city. SLAs for the residents.
Yes.
Do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. Coming from the world of tech, SLAs and KPIs are what I live by. And one thing that we're trying to add as well to how the city approaches problem solving is actually adding, I'll put it in this context. In my department, we probably do anywhere between $2 to $3 billion worth of processing of contracts per year. And you can imagine we have thousands, hundreds of contractors that work in this city at any given time. How do we ensure that that particular contractor is doing exactly what the city needs, exactly at the time we need? Now that does two things. It helps us as citizens make sure ensuring that we are getting the best bang for our buck. On the other end, it also helps us provide feedback to the contractors to let them know where they may be falling short or where maybe they're doing a really good job. So adding those SLAs to an elevator contractor that's fixing our elevator. Well, how are we monitoring what kind of job that elevator contractor is doing? How many times did they come and not fix it, or need to come back, or how many trips does that take? And then that helps us at the negotiating table when it's time to renegotiate those contracts again for the city of Denver. So we're actually tying that into the contract piece, but we're also tying that into even the phone calls and a lot of the other things that I discussed.
Yeah, exciting.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you want to take off from that and add some of the bigger problems or some of the Tiger Teams details?
Yeah, thanks, Dean. And I see why Al is a professor here. I'm going to audit that class. And it is fun to be back on campus. Thanks for having us. Really, it's an honor to be here. And I'd be remiss too if I didn't just say I feel out of place in this panel. All these folks are eminently qualified for the roles. I know this because I was in the hiring team that helped hire them last summer. We have built an amazing team. And I'd say maybe that, to riff off of Al's comments, it's hard enough to run a city with all the issues he just mentioned without, the homeless crisis. When Mayor Johnston got elected last summer, we were in the midst of an awful homeless crisis. I think everybody is familiar with that. And then just as we were starting to make real progress on that, we were hit with a huge migrant crisis and have experienced more migrants come into Denver per capita than any other city outside of Texas, which was a massive challenge to manage. And we've got a homeless crisis. We had especially in part because of the homeless crisis, we had a safety crisis, especially downtown with crime. So that's what the mayor came into a year ago. And so from my perspective, hard enough to run a city with all the issues that you're having to manage. What we needed to make sure we did right when the mayor came in was hire the right people. So we had, I'd say, an amazing transition committee experience where we had over 600 people from all walks of life, the education sector, business sector, nonprofit sector, all walks of life, over 600 people who basically formed these transition committees, 26 different transition committees, who advised us on every agency. Each group was assigned to an agency and told us what the community priorities for that agency were and the hiring profile, the kind of leadership that we should hire for that agency. It was an incredibly helpful process. I would say that transition committee was a majority of people of color and majority female. And as part of that, we ended up hiring a cabinet that was majority people of color and majority female. And I would say that the strength of that cabinet, the diversity of thought that we have on that cabinet, is helping us address not only these macro problems, these international crises that we're having to manage, but also the nuts and bolts of running a city, which is hard enough. So we've got an amazing team, majority, just an incredible cabinet of folks. And I think we're starting to make real progress on all those big macro issues, but and we're going to talk more about that today. But especially on these issues that we're going to talk about here, we're making just great progress on all fronts. So just really, really thrilled to be part of the team. Really, really thrilled to be colleagues with this esteemed group of people. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. So you said 26 different transition teams?
Yeah. Over 500 people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people, a lot of teams. Now, how do those transition teams evolve or lead to the Tiger teams that you're talking about? And what are some of the Tiger teams that are currently in place and looking at what issues?
Yeah, well, so in addition to hiring the right people, we had to establish really clear goals, right, to stay focused. And the mayor did that with a vision that he created several months ago, which is, together we can create a Denver that is safe, affordable, and vibrant. And so those are the three main frames that we then use to create the goals that we've created in the Tiger teams that basically are, a group of leaders from all the different agencies. But I think what's new about this approach in Denver is historically the agencies in Denver, they work together-ish, but under this Tiger team model, Al mentioned it. The idea is we're forcing really the focus of an interagency cooperation on weekly meetings that meet with the mayor on these issues that fall under those key headings, right? So Vibrant Denver, we'll talk more about what we're doing with downtown. That's Safe Denver, including all the safety initiatives that we've launched. And then, our emphasis on ending homelessness in Denver and creating 3,000 affordable units of housing every single year while this mayor is in office. So, and we've got Tiger teams that, again, are made up of leaders from all these different agencies who are working together really, really closely in a way that, just creates synergies that probably the city agencies haven't experienced in many, many years.
Yeah, no, if I can add something to what Jeff is saying, it's a really important point, and I think it's important for the city to know too. It's a cross-pollination of skill sets, backgrounds, and ideas in these Tiger teams of what makes it so effective, I believe. So if we have a all-in Mile High team, and to Jeff's point, the mayor set the goals, and then the Tiger teams report to the goals, and now we actually have Cub teams that help Tiger teams. I'm like a Russian nesting dog, but they all filter up to that. And I think it's the fact that I'm on a safety team, but my agency doesn't necessarily deal with the safety department. However, we understand the moving pieces behind it. I'm on teams with Suma and Adib as well. So the cross-pollination of different agencies is what makes, I think, unique the way that we're approaching it through this Tiger team perspective.
Yeah.
And Dean, I might just jump in with a couple of specifics around how AI can help us potentially within some of the issues that were mentioned here. It's interesting to look at it because I think AI is still very much an emerging technology, and the amount of use cases I think are actually very limited. But when Jeff was speaking about the migrant issue, this is such a critical issue for us because for Denver, dealing with immigration and federal immigration law is not something that we have a lot of expertise at. We don't have a border. We don't normally have inflows like we've seen the last year with 40,000 individuals coming into Denver. And so it's very complicated. We're dealing with individuals who have different levels of status. And right now, a majority of the folks that we are dealing with are individuals who are asylum seekers. In order to get work authorization, these individuals must apply for asylum in the United States. And that application is extremely complex. It requires one-on-one legal support. It can take 20 to 40 hours to be able to fill out one of those applications. But the mayor and his team, Jeff and others, are looking at AI solutions that exist right now that are able to help individuals navigate that in a more easy way and in a batch way where we can work with a lot of people at the same time. And so that's a great way in which we can use intelligence to be able to answer these questions in a way that allows people to navigate the legal nature of what an asylum application is. When Jeff was talking about public safety, that's another huge issue. And to be able to have a smart city, we need to have really effective public safety systems going forward. I've actually seen models out of New York right now, which are currently using AI in their 911 systems. Yonkers has a program right now, for example, where it'll automatically transcribe what the 911 caller is calling in at, and then it'll prompt the dispatcher to ask the right questions during that call. So one, the dispatcher is not focused on typing everything because it's transcribing everything they're hearing in the right place. It knows when it gets an address. It knows when it's getting the conditions of the situation. And then on top of that, the AI is saying, make sure you're asking these questions. So it's able to kind of navigate that information, make the dispatcher more effective, and also allows the dispatcher not to have years of training to understand how to diagnose the situation and get the right person to respond in the right way. And so I think it's tools like that we're just starting to see emerge in the public sector that I think are going to be really effective for us as we navigate these very complex issues that oftentimes cities, are on the front cutting edge of dealing with.
Great examples. Suma, we're going to be coming to you in a minute with these examples. A couple of questions, though, I wanted to get to before we get to the technology piece. Just in terms of the Tiger teams, can you share an example of how that interagency cooperation and interaction has led to an idea that you thought may have been difficult to come up with in the absence of that kind of conversation? I know.
Yeah, one of the earliest examples of the Tiger Team model when the mayor came in, clearly the number one issue that he identified, after the election and conversations and dozens of community meetings was the homeless crisis downtown, especially, but in the city of Denver. And, he decided really that was going to be the number one issue for the administration to address. And for 6 months, they put a stake in the ground and really created the model. He wanted to make sure that the model would work, I think. And so, he made the goal that we were going to house 1,000 people in 6 months. This is starting last summer, and weekly, and probably I think it was multiple times a week. This interagency group of leaders from our housing agencies, Al's agency, Deep's agency, Suma's agency, they would all come together multiple times a week in meetings to talk about the strategy to move 1,000 people indoors. No city had ever moved 1,000 homeless individuals indoors ever in 6 months. And so when the mayor made that goal, we all panicked because we thought it was not possible because it had never been done before. But I think because of the relentless sort of creativity of that Tiger Team model and sort of the radical urgency of that team coming together in that way around this really clear goal of housing 1,000 people in 6 months, we housed 1,200 people in 6 months. We're now at 1,500 people housed since the mayor took office, and by the end of the year, we'll have 2,000 people housed who were previously homeless individuals in housing, getting access to services, getting access to addiction services, drug treatment services, et cetera. So I think that is probably the most clear example of how this Tiger Team model can work when you bring that group of agency leaders together who may not sort of naturally be aligned to work that closely together, but you create the structure for it and you create the permission for them to laser focus on one goal. you can achieve really remarkable things. And I think we have, at least on this issue.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of lives that have been positively affected. I need one more question and then we'll go to Sue.
Yeah.
As you put on your economic development hat and you have conversations with potential companies coming in or companies that you're trying to attract, how do these issues play into these conversations and how are you selling what the mayor and the leadership represented here are doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, anytime you're talking about business development or economic development, I think one of the key things that has been successful for Denver is our quality of life, and two, the talent that we have here in Denver. And typically they go hand in hand because the talent is moving to Denver because of the quality of life that we have. And so when we have issues that are pervasive, like our homelessness issue, and it then bleeds into a public safety issue, it becomes one of those things where the quality of life is negatively affected. The attractiveness of Denver is reduced. On top of that, we're also facing issues as a city around affordability, as I think all of us in this room know. And so if it's not affordable, if it's maybe less safe, we're competing with every other city in the country around these same issues. Are we going to be able to attract the talent that's really going to be effective for businesses to come here and thrive? Because for businesses, at the end of the day, talent is such a key part of what makes them go. And so for us then, in terms of being able to address those issues, we have to ensure that we're as competitive as possible. We're competing with the Austins, we're competing with Salt Lake, we're competing with Seattle, we're competing with Portland, we're competing with many of the cities around the region that are facing similar issues. And so for us, we have to continually be pushing that competitive edge about how can we increase affordability, how can we reduce homelessness, one, just as a means of making our city safer, two, as a way of being able to provide pathways to self-sufficiency for many of our individuals who are unhoused, and then also being able to find ways that we as a community are creating the kind of vibrancy where we're all coming together around solutions. I mean, the city is us. It's not just us who essentially work at the city every day. It's all of the people in the room here, and we all want to live in a place collectively that is a great place to live and it's a great place to thrive, is affordable. And so the more we can kind of create those foundational pillars, the better we're going to be able to do in terms of being able to drive companies into Denver, then continue to attract and develop talent locally, so that we can meet the talent demands and grow effective businesses that are on the cutting edge, because that's what we're trying to do.
If I could put in a little plug, we of course love the idea of talent development here at DU. But Suma, so this is your opportunity. I'd love to hear from you on some of the technology solutions that you've developed already, and I believe.
Great.
Please.
Thank you, Dean, so much for having us. It's such an honor to be alongside with my colleagues here, who I have immense respect for, because the challenges that we face together as a team are many, but because we work together so well, we are able to look at problems and think of solutions creatively. So thank you. My claim to fame with DU is my daughter graduated from DU as a bachelor scholar, and I'm forever grateful for the leadership and mentorship of amazing people at DU. Thank you for all that DU does. So I'm going to touch upon the technology aspects, but I'll do that with the lens of people, process, and policy, especially as it comes with generative AI, which is, Adeep has said it, it's an emerging technology. There are some examples that we've put together, but I'll also tell the story of why it's important, both from my own personal lens, as well as the problems that we're trying to solve. I'll start with policy, because that's important, how we ground ourselves. Because it's an emerging technology, it's very important for us to look out for the things that may go wrong with a technology like generative AI. Algorithmic transparency is critical. Making sure those large language models do not have built-in biases, ethical considerations, all of these are very, very critical when you're building the policy around generative AI. So we've done that at the City and County of Denver using very extensive policies based on the NIST framework and other cities that, like New York, like LA, like Singapore, London, that are already emerging as leaders in this space. I was fortunate enough to be at the OpenAI Global Convening of Cities. And to your point, cities are the first place where all of this starts. OpenAI, for example, started with federal. They didn't get a lot of traction. I wonder why. They started with state, couldn't get a lot of traction. But then with the cities, they were able to get to use cases faster. So when you have considerations like, there's a concept called hallucinations with large language models that can happen because these large language models are still learning, right? So how do you ensure that it's not reading information off of the internet, for example? How do you ensure that it's staying within the boundaries that you create? And how do you ensure that its learnings are human-centered? Very, very critical. So the policy, we first established that. And I'll tell a story around all of this. I've been following deep learning and neural networks and machine learning models for quite some time. I've started as a programmer, so for me, intrinsically, I'm always looking at ways to improve coding. When I was a programmer myself, it was very hard even to write the syntax in some of the languages. But now, AI does most of it, right? And you're just doing a logic-based and creative-based coding at this time, which the students of this generation are very lucky because you're not focused on the syntax and things like that. It's also very important to look at the outcomes, and again, as the large language models are learning, to see if it is on the right path and course correct as we go, right? So it's important to build in that disclaimers when you're building these models. The other thing that's important is the people aspect, right? Ensuring that every voice is represented in the right way is super, super critical in the policy. For example, I come from an Asian heritage, and we in India wear a dot on our foreheads. The large language models does not recognize that. There's a lot of discrimination that can happen in the hiring practices based on the people that are inputting the language requirements. So there's an inherent bias that can happen there, right? So it's important for people to look at data, the governance, the data protection aspects. HIPAA for healthcare is critical, right? All these are considerations when you're building the policy and making sure that you have a governance model that can challenge each other's notions, right? And make sure that every voice is represented. And I'll go back to my personal story. The DEI components of this, right? Again, I benefited because someone took a chance on me and gave an opportunity for me to be part of State of Colorado's cabinet as the Secretary of Technology, because someone believed in me and gave that even though I didn't have any connections. The same thing, right? I was the CDO of Dish Network and Everbridge, Critical Event Management. If there was discrimination built in the hiring because someone relied just on a large language model and took the human out, maybe I wouldn't have gotten those roles. And so that DEI component is important, right? And it's also important for us to look at the outcomes and is it truly trending in the right direction, especially when you have sensitive issues like homelessness, like migrants. There's a lot of things already at play. You don't want technology to be a bad actor in that. So it's up to the humans, human-centered design. I think it's one of the courses that DU teaches. It's critical to include the people that you are representing in your large language programming. So that's important, right? The people aspect. The leaders here, they all are at the City and County of Denver because they care about the outcomes. And that's important. When you do technology for the sake of technology and leave the people aspect, it doesn't matter. So who are those people in charge of the technology? Do they care enough about the outcomes is equally important. Policy, people, I'll come to technology in just a second. That's the easy aspect, trust me. And then process. The Tiger Teams is a great example. There's a lot of cross-functional things that can happen. So you're looking at it, again, from a resident experience standpoint rather than I'm general services, I'm strategy, I'm economic development, right? It's just not putting the resident in the center of that. So looking at the outcomes from that and working backwards and seeing what is it that you want to achieve is equally important. And then I'll come to technology. Google has come out with Gemini, the ChatGPT, the advent of that. When it first started out in November 2023, it was getting built up to that, right? The hype cycle is, Gartner talks about it quite a bit. we actually created a policy. I was at a private sector organization called Insight, and we built, after we created the policy working with NIST and Microsoft's Office of Responsible AI, we had them at the table building with us. When we were having these conversations, a lot of companies and organizations wanted to ban ChatGPT. Whenever you say the word ban, people are going to go use it double, right? So that's the nature of it. But then we were a global organization, so we had to work with data privacy experts, whether it was GDPR in Europe, CCPA types of regulations within California, Nevada. Every state has their own version of that, right? And get all of that framework in place and make sure that it was all taken care of. Then we built within our own private instance of Azure, this vector database, sideloaded it with our Insight data, which was very particularly focused on contracts that Insight had. That was our first use case. And then we also had it as distribution and manufacturing. We were a hardware reseller, so we had it in our. So what it did was we built it on top of our SAP system with SAP data that we've again triaged, and then sideloaded it into our vector database. And then we started looking at how is the machine learning, right? And how is it coming out with the outcomes? A small example right there was a manufacturing analyst or distribution analyst that would come to IT and create a case and all of that. They were able to just ask a prompt within the database and they were able to get answers. And that cut down our ticket times and all of that by like 20% right away. So those were the small wins that made us confident, right? And we are also making sure that it doesn't look at answers from the internet, and it had to contain within our encapsulated version. So that was my first thing. At that time, I was asked by several of our clients, including NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, because they were looking at how to create the policy. And I was able to go talk with them on how the financial data is being looked at. And that's how we started with the financial, and they were very excited. So I talked with Fast Company Impact Council, and we looked at data from a financial lens, and is it generating the right outcomes? Through this process at Insight, we were able to look at our highest risk contracts and see with simple prompts how it was able to generate answers that we were seeking. So that was a good experience. During that time, Mike Johnston transition team that the team mentioned now, I was part of that. I was not looking because I was making good private sector money. But then I was like, oh my gosh, he's trying to do something so very critical for the city and county of Denver, which has embraced me and given me opportunities that I wouldn't have imagined, that I wanted to give back to the community. So that's when I was like, I'll come back to public sector, now as a city and county of Denver CIO. So I had experience working at Insight, a large organization, $10 billion. And I was like, what do we do to take that policy framework and tweak it to the city and county of Denver? So there was already a governance committee that was working on it. So we fine-tuned and tweaked it to make sure it fit the public sector more. So we were using generative AI, whether it was Copilot, Copilot in GitHub, GitLab, within those instances, just within IT. And we were using automation, so some of the use cases and some of the problems and challenges, right? Whether it's permitting times, licensing times, and all of that. How do we reduce that using these large language models, learning from trends, learning from what is it that causes the most friction for us? So we looked at that and we decided, okay, we can do small pilots within our instances. And we would go to the work authorization clinic and things like that. I'll come back to these things, but then we introduced what's called Sunny, our chatbot. And I'll give you an example and I'll tell you why this is so important and why I'm so happy to be back in public sector. Look at that for just a second. This is someone that needs help. Would they be comfortable calling someone and saying, I'm hungry, please help me? The likelihood of it is low. So we are able to create this Sunny, our chatbot, within our encapsulated instance of our AWS, using our own data within Denver Gov website. And it's able to help a person that may be not very comfortable calling and saying, I'm hungry, please help me. That's the power of technology. That's the power of AI. Used the right way. Again, I talked about policy. We just didn't do it haphazard. It's not like a United chatbot, right? This has a lot of thought going into it. And it's 24/7. So we are cutting down on our resources. It speaks 72 different languages. Just imagine if we have to hire for 72 different language people to support our platform. It's simply not cost effective for us. And we can take those resources and put it into the system again, right? Also, we are leaving the transactional work to the bots and leaving the transformational work to humans. So the true value add is being done by humans, and the transactional work is done by bots. All of this is integrated into our backend systems like Workday and others. It's all within our cloud. So it truly is something that we are proud of, even though it's just a bot. It's just not a bot. It's a platform that we are continuously working and learning from and making sure that we are helping the most vulnerable populations. That's why I left my private sector job, is to help the most vulnerable populations. That's the impact of technology on people's lives. And at the state of Colorado, when I was the Secretary of Technology, Medicare and Medicaid processing times used to take somewhere close to 2 to 3 months with a lot of paper. $5 million just spent on stamps. And those people wouldn't even get the information because most of the times their housing was not permanent. So those benefits would never even go to the people that needed it the most. So we cut it down by using robotic process automation, intelligent cloud, and was able to cut down the processing times to minutes and all on a mobile phone. Because if people are homeless and others, they may give up on everything, but they may not give up their phones. That's the best way to reach them. So that was very important, right? So that's the kind of experience that went into creating this bot. And this is just, again, one example. We're using it for language access translation, which is a simple use case. We're using it in contracts. We're also, I'm going to go back to my e-coupon. Again, a very manual process, but we're using RPA and other digital technologies to help ensure that we are able to do it within minutes, a digital e-coupon to recycle your hardware and stuff, and not wait for a physical coupon to come in the mail. Simple example. The potential is immense. The threat is immense from technology. Either we take care of it or it takes care of us, right, in that sense. Companies like Workday, Salesforce, Microsoft, they are using AI whether we like it or not. Do we educate ourselves more so that we can use it the right way and not be the victims of someone else using the technology? They're using it no matter what, whether we like it or not. And we can't live without technology, unfortunately. So how do we ensure that, again, the policy is solid? Again, it needs to evolve and it needs to tweak, right, every single time. How do we ensure that the technologies that we are using is truly done with that algorithmic transparency, making sure that the recursions are happening so much faster now with generative AI. Cybersecurity, for example. Hackers are using it. We may not want to use it, but they're using it. So how do we keep up with all the recursions and the polymorphism and all the code that's happening constantly in someone's basement? And it's a matter of when, right, with cybersecurity, for example. So how do we ensure we stay on top of that? So how do we take that same technology, but use it in a way that we go against the threats and vulnerabilities that exist within our systems? There's not enough number of resources. So it's very, very important. And then there's a new set of technologies. You know, the question that I get asked is technology going to replace humans? If we let it, it will, but we are in charge, right? When it's taking away a lot of the mundane tasks and, you know, taking away the soul-sucking work, that's good. But it's also creating new roles, like prompt engineering, for example. How do you take the coding and do it faster? It's replacing skills in the creative fields, whether it's film writing and music and all of that, it's happening. So how do we ensure still that the human voice is not lost in that and our authentic voices are seen while using technology? So this is a little glimpse of it. We are in the cloud. We use a lot of our data technologies. We have strong data pipelines built to ensure that, again, the data privacy, the data governance, the data protection are all happening. But we're also using technology to help us in a very responsible manner. And when we have the limited resources that we do, how do we ensure that they're doing the transformational work and we are taking away all of that so that they can focus on the true value add and help the most vulnerable populations that need the services? I've said a lot.
All good stuff. Thank you, Suma. So I'm really glad to hear that you're focusing so much on responsible AI. And to your point about trying to ban technology, that has never worked, right? As you can imagine, as an educational institution that has things called written assignments for students, ChatGPT was a little bit of a concern. But one of the things that we at DU take pride in is saying we never banned it. Instead, we are thinking creatively about how we make the best use of it and prepare our students. But within that responsible AI framework, what I would love for all four of you to do a little bit is to imagine the future. Imagine what Denver as a smart city could be. What would you like to see? What could you visualize as the future of the resident experience in Denver if this technology is exploited in the ways that Suma described, that you described, and other opportunities?
Yeah, I'll look at it through the eyes of general services, and one of the divisions that fall under general services is energy, and how we pay for. The city can pay millions of dollars per month for energy. In Suma's context, she talks about interweaving access in everything that we do. Another one is access to small businesses and how they interact with the city. Let's take those two things from an energy perspective. If right now we're paying millions of dollars a month, you can manage we have about 143 buildings across the city. Translates to a lot of money. How do we learn how to use predictive analytics in a way that allows us then to measure the investment that we need to make in solar, in gas, though we're not anymore using some kind of older ways that we do those calculations to how much the yield is going to be, but really using predictive analytics to get the most out of those reusable sources. That's something that I imagine and think about all the time. How can we run the city from a structural perspective a lot more lean? The second thing that you mentioned of talking about small business, right now we use a software called BidNet, and it's really literally tens of thousands of businesses on BidNet, and they have to go in every day to try and find these opportunities. How would AI being able to actually locate those opportunities and reach out to those small businesses who don't have a lot of folks that can sit there all day and take a look at the opportunities and go back and forth? What would it look like if tonight, you're a small business that just provides tablecloths, but not the whole shebang with the food and lemonade and tea, but you provide tablecloths. So how can we match the tablecloth maker with the person who's providing everything else and allow those to seamlessly come together? And those are some of the things that I can tell you that I think about from a services perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like one of the pain points just coming in here was traffic, right? I mean, who loves traffic? Nobody. I got people graduating, high schoolers crossing every which way. I think if you look at what's capable, and we're just dreaming about the future, zero pedestrian fatalities, zero injuries, I mean, zero even car wrecks. I mean, these are what's possible if you have a smart system where not only are the stoplights and the infrastructure itself plugged in, but every car that's registered in the city is also plugged into the system. So you have the ability for cars to be more efficient on the highways, platooning, being able to keep gaps close to each other, not having accidents. You're able to understand where you have crossings, where you have high amounts of pedestrian injuries or even fatalities, and you're able to change the lighting systems and the crossing systems so that we're not having those same kinds of incidences. I was just coming from Dublin, Ireland, where we met with Accenture, and they did a year-long study in Broward County in Florida, and they looked at every intersection where they had the highest number of pedestrian fatalities. And then they were able to set up cameras to understand where all the close calls were, and they overlapped all of the data, and they were able to understand that basically the right-hand turns at this one intersection where 95% of the problems were coming from. And just by extending that crosswalk an extra 10 or 15 seconds, they were able to reduce the number of pedestrian injuries that were happening there by like 80%. And so those kinds of things can be achieved, and they can be achieved without an Accenture doing a year-long study. They can be achieved by just collecting data, analyzing it, and being able to put those processes in place. So a city without traffic, a city without any pedestrian injuries or fatalities, and a city where we're all able to move as efficiently as possible throughout the city. That's the kind of city I want to live in.
City without traffic.
Yeah, right, no traffic.
And if I may add, for the visually impaired or for the elderly population,
Absolutely.
what a blessing to be able to cross the street knowing there's a smart traffic signal at work. That could stop things that,
Yeah.
which we don't even think about. We might get to the negative consequences of smart driving later, but there's policy issues there. And with respect to your energy, the conversations I've had suggested the biggest barriers to really widespread use of AI in this world might be energy.
Oh,
Just
goodness.
sustainable and reliable energy,
I mean,
given the amount of energy it takes.
yeah, when we look at it from an economic development perspective, we want to be competitive in AI. I mean, you look at the industry right now, for example, that we're struggling with, that we just are pumping billions in, is semiconductors. Right now, majority of our semiconductors, which we need in every technology that we're basically using in this country, from electric vehicles to our airplanes, to our computers or cell phones, they all require semiconductors. And we're heavily reliant on international companies. China development, Taiwan is one of the largest development of semiconductors. We do not have that infrastructure here in America. And so now we're pumping $50 billion plus with the CHIPS Act to be able to try and catch up. I think with AI, we don't want to be in a position where we're trying to catch up, and it's already happening, where more of the AI companies are being developed overseas. And so if we think about how are we going to stay competitive in developing AI companies, energy is probably one of the biggest concerns because of the amount of energy that's used. We already have energy issues. On top of that, we have an inefficient grid. Like, our transmission lines are just as much of an energy issue as our ability to generate sustainable energy. And so without upgrading our infrastructure from a transmission perspective, and then on top of that, being able to invest more heavily in efficient energy production, we will fall behind in those areas. So it might not be a specific issue that's on a local level, but on a federal level as this country, I think your point about energy is incredibly important. And it's going to be incredibly important from an economics perspective because we have to stay competitive when it comes to AI. As Suma said, where everybody's going to be using it. So
Yeah, that's important. So Jeff, we have a city without traffic and a city with endless energy. Bar has been raised. What are you going to imagine about the city?
Sounds pretty awesome. Housing for everybody. How about that?
Oh, there you go. That's a
and,
wonderful goal.
I think what Suma said about the city's use of AI to remove more of the soul sucking work from some of the employees. We've got 13,000 employees in the city of Denver who serve a population of 750,000 people. And what I've been really overjoyed to learn about that workforce at the city of Denver is these are deeply committed people who are, they're in those jobs to provide, service to their community. But there is a lot of, there's a lot of bureaucracy in the work, right? And so the idea of being able to use AI to reduce the amount of soul sucking work that the employees
Say
have
that
to do
3 times.
is amazing. Soul sucking. That is, just in terms of permitting, for example, right? Like, that is a very persistent pain point for anybody who wants to modify their home, or a developer who wants to build homes, or a condominium complex or apartments. Permitting process has been a persistent pain point, and that falls under one of our primary goals that we have, that the mayor has put forth this year in terms of improving government, great government, cutting permitting time in half. Well, AI is an amazing tool for that. We've already seen remarkable progress on that front, which is freeing up those employees who manage the permitting at different levels at the city to just move much more efficiently, much faster, and spend more of their time in a quality way doing that customer facing, constituent facing work that is so critical why we're, why we want to live in this city, right? We want a city that serves us, want a city government that serves us and produces things that we need, whether it's, no traffic, unlimited energy, or housing that everybody can afford. If you're an educator on this campus, you're a nurse serving the students here. If you're one of our park employees who, we keep Wash Park so beautiful for everybody to enjoy, you've got to be able to live in the city that you're serving. And so that is a huge, priority for us. And we're making good progress on the permitting front to make more affordable housing happen more quickly.
That's certainly a great goal. So what do you do?
For me, healthcare is somewhere I think AI can play a critical role, and it's already doing that. If you look at the amount of data that can help increase lifespan, increase the quality of life, go through tons and tons of medical records, and be able to be predictive, proactive, and prescriptive, right? So that the doctors can do what they do best in saving people's lives. I think that is a great use case. There's so much potential in that. Intelligent transportation, intelligent infrastructure, right? Energy is, we are dependent on other countries. So having self-reliant on energy and other resources, natural resources. Colorado is such a beautiful state. How do we keep those resources intact? And AI can play a big role so that we're not just throwing resources haphazardly, but in a very streamlined fashion. AI for good is very important. There's so much we can do in order to save people's lives. My daughter that, again, graduated from DU, she worked on an algorithm to help predict or even find out where the next mass shooting can happen based on data. And she faced so many challenges in getting to that algorithm because of policy, regulation, Washington, all of the above. But if there is a chance we can save a kid's life, that's AI for good, right? If we can get people in Africa and India clean water, if we can get homelessness reduced in Denver, which the mayor is working so hard along with his team, that's good. For me, it's about using responsible technology to help create a vibrant Denver, a safe Denver, and an affordable Denver, and a Denver for all, where we can all live, thrive, succeed, and create generational success, not just for the few privileged, but for everyone. So.
Good. So obviously that sounds like a great vision. We should go there. I'm going to ask one last question, not to end on a down note, but I want you to advise that young person, 15, 16 years old, and perhaps I shouldn't say this sitting on this campus, but say, I don't want to go to college. I don't want to be a data scientist. What is my future? What will I be doing? What kind of roles will I have? And how will this city imagine and help me get to that successful middle-class future, if you will, if not better?
Well, I mean, right now, speaking today, I mean, there are many career paths for individuals who don't necessarily want to go and get a 4-year degree that are definitely, you can earn a great living and you can be self-sustaining. And in fact, we're really struggling on so many of these jobs that are so critical. So, Jeff speaking about, housing for everybody. I fully believe in that vision. But one of the biggest impediments we have right now is our construction industry. Nationally, our construction industry has a worker shortage of 500,000 individuals, and that's expected to double in the next 2 years. You cannot build housing without people who are there to build the housing. And on top of that, we need many of the trade jobs, like our electricians, our welders, our plumbers. All these jobs are critical and will continue to be critical for years to come. So I think if you're an individual, I think many of those career paths that we have with our apprenticeship models, with our trade programs, I would encourage you to pursue that and to get right into it. I think on top of it too, as we think about the jobs of the future and we think about the effects of AI, to me it's that, I think we as individuals are going to need to learn how to work as effectively as possible with AI and with technology, just like we are doing with the internet right now. I think how do we develop that skill set? That's not something I think a lot of us are trained to do at the moment, but I think that's going to be critical as we move forward. And you don't necessarily need a college degree. Your power and your ability to do analytics and critical thinking without a degree, because you now can use the tool of AI effectively, is going to be greatly enhanced. And being able to deliver that on a company is really important. I think for us as a city, what we need to start thinking about is upskilling, because we're going to have a lot of individuals whose jobs may be obsolete in the future. And so how do we do an effective job of ensuring that we provide pathways for individuals through upskilling to become more effective employee, to have the skill set that's going to be more effective for the future? And so that's how we need to really start thinking about it. Yes, it's kind of scary because jobs will probably become obsolete. That happens with any new emerging technology. It's natural. However, how do we adjust and do that effectively and take advantage of the technology to really create more prosperity and to use AI for good, as Simo was mentioning?
Just going to say, I think we continue to look to Adib's point is over the curve, or they say the cutting edge and the bleeding edge, but how do you look around the corner to make the type of difficult decisions now that can support those upskilled jobs that Adib just mentioned, right? Because you can't keep all of the cylinders pumping on everything. Eventually, something's going to have to decrease in order for us to put resources where it needs to be. And I think for the city, it's where do we find efficiency in every nook and cranny that exists at the city and county building, web building, and every other building, to invest in those spaces that will eventually employ these folks. And I think it's important for the city. What can we do right now is continue to put confidence in someone 16 or 15 that the city's doing all it can to ensure that it can do its part for your success.
Well, I love that point, Al. And in fact, today, I guess Al, this is his way of prompting me to recall our press conference from the mayor. Earlier today, the mayor announced a $1.7 million program for this summer to put kids to work this summer, to encourage kids to work, because we know, especially in some of our communities and neighborhoods in the city where the crime rate is at its highest, that's important because during the summer months, those kids don't have anything to do, or they can't afford to participate in some of these enrichment programs that maybe middle-class families can afford to do. So with this program we announced today, $1.7 million, and what we've put out the call for employers to hire high school students, and if those students, if those employees work more than 100 hours this summer, the city will provide an additional $1,000 grant to that employee. So we put out the call to employers to participate in the program. We put out the call to high school students to sign up and apply for the program. And it's going to be a great way to keep young people busy this summer and make them productive, but most importantly, connect them to a network of partners who can invest in their success and invest in their future. Because I think this city, one of the most remarkable things about it is its willingness to support others to succeed. And I've experienced that as a transplant to Denver. Like a lot of us are probably in this room have moved here from somewhere else, and I think a really defining value or really defining sort of quality of the city of Denver is we support each other. And so I think those students that you asked about, there's a bright future for them here in the city. We'll make it so because we're going to work together to get there.
Don't let big tech dictate how tech is done to kids. How many of your kids are on social media? It's happening, right? So we need nonlinear perspectives to shape technology. We don't want only technologists shaping technology. It's so important for the artists, the music writers, the film writers, and the social workers, all of them to voice their opinions so that they are represented equally in the technology policies. Otherwise, big tech is happy doing algorithm after algorithm that's going to take your money, and you're on social media constantly on reels and Snapchat and all of that. So we want kids to know that you don't need to be a programmer to influence technology. You can take advantage of all the things technology has to offer, but also have your voice heard. So it's good if your nonlinear technologists are shaping the voice of AI, and it's not only that, it's crucial for their voices to be heard. So we need to just create those platforms where they can freely express themselves and make sure that their voice is represented equally, and don't let big tech take advantage of everything. They will. I mean, I'm a technologist, so I know how it works. So just make sure that we protect our kids and they protect themselves. So.
You know, I was on a panel recently on the future of work with AI. And when asked what is the future of work, I said that's a wrong question. Because really what we need to ask is what is the future of life with AI?
Right.
And if we truly sit down and imagine what life can be like with AI, then we'll identify a whole bunch of opportunities for additional interesting work and additional possibilities. And I say that only to say I'm grateful that there are leaders like this who are in the business of imagining what is the future of residents and citizens of Denver. And they are putting residents in the center, and they are really imagining what's possible and what their lives should be like, because that's really the perspective that we want to be adopting. So thank you to all of you. Now I'm going to open up to the audience to see if you have a couple of questions that you would like to ask of our panelists. I see a hand going back there.
I appreciate this development perspective. And my concern, a study came out recently that in the next 5 to 10 years, by 2030, 800 million jobs will be lost to AI. I'll give you a great example in long haul trucking. That's 250,000 people lower income in this country. We talked about trying to build up Denver to be more affordable and try to build it up from the bottom. But when you see that type of displacement for low income workers, what is the city going to do there? Because it's not only going to affect long haul trucking, it's going to be accounted as a fair deal. I see that I'm probably with water radiologists. They're scared. They really are scared. Individual radiologists, path. Using AI, all kind of digital data sets and radiology and predictions without. So I would like to see or hear what the city has response to that threat and how that will challenge the city that's currently dealing with an affordability problem when jobs become more scarce. So this is a resource for the city.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, as we utilize this technology, I think that we cannot create technology that's only going to benefit a few, and that's not going to benefit us as a society as a whole. So if we're a long haul trucking company that is basically now profiting off of having an automated long haul trucking program, and is displacing hundreds of thousands of jobs as a result of it, to me that's a fundamental issue, and that's bad for everybody. And so we need to be able to develop solutions, and we need to be able to apply the technology for public good and not just for capital gain. I think that's going to be really important for us as we move forward, because it's uncharted waters. I'd love to say, like, yeah, we've got a 3-point plan in terms of how we can ensure that everyone's going to be able to have a more affordable lifestyle as a result as we move forward in this era. But the reality is we don't even know in 5 years if there's going to be long haul trucking, or 10 years or 20 years even, if that's going to be something that can be automated. So I think there's nervousness around the potential of AI. There's nervousness around displacing jobs. What I also hear from a lot of folks is that this is also going to create many new jobs, and it's also potentially going to reduce the demands on individuals in terms of how much they have to work. We're already seeing a lot of European countries and even places in the United States where they're experimenting with 32-hour work weeks. Could we see our total work weeks potentially go down? Could we have lifestyles that are allowing us to spend more time with our kids and family? I think that, to me, is the future that I'm hoping for. And as a city, but more importantly, I think as a country and as a government and as a society, we need to be able to develop solutions that are going to utilize technology for good, so that we're reducing the issues and we're starting there. We're not just focusing on how a few people can capitalize the most by utilizing the technology. So It's a challenge for sure, but I think for us as we navigate through this, one, we want to create jobs by utilizing the technology, as many as possible, and two, we want to make sure that we're being as predictive as possible on the potential effects that technology poses. And as a government, as an ethics, as how we look at the regulatory nature, European Union's already putting in an EU act. They're working on an AI act right now in the EU. United States, we're behind in that process. And so I think, we recently released a study that was conducted in Congress for a year. So I think those are bigger issues on a federal level, but as a city, we need to combat it. We need to think about it. We need to be predictive in it and find out opportunities where they exist.
And if I can add to what Adib said, cross-training, right? Those long-haul truckers, maybe they do something else in addition to just that, right? Jobs have been displacing to whether it was outsourcing for quite a number of years, right? Jobs went to China, India. Now it's going to AI. So we all are going to be impacted. So that's why I think that voices of those people that may not know what's happening to them until their job is lost, it's too late. They need to be able to learn some other skill, some other new technology, some other thing to keep their livelihoods going. Otherwise, there is an impact. And we still don't know fully the true impact. We're still evaluating it. And there needs to be pressure on these big tech companies, maybe for every job that AI replaces, maybe they can bring in a training or something that they're investing back in the communities, right? It's a big debate.
What about data privacy? When I hear things like AI and public safety, AI and traffic stop, like the first thing I'm thinking of is data privacy. That feels like such a big problem in the private sector right now. What's going to happen in the public sector?
Yep, great question. Data protection, data privacy, data, the 3 Cs, all of them are foundational. Those are the data sets that are going into the large language models, right? And the large language models are learning out of that. That's why in Europe you have GDPR, right, that protects data. California has CCPA, which protects individual data on what can be shared, what can be shared. It's so important for you as the consumer to know your rights and to ensure that your data is not being compromised. When you allow cookies, right, it's convenient to just accept all cookies. You are giving up your data. So how do you ensure your voice is being represented, right? So make sure that the data privacy, you're asking the questions of the companies, whether it's private or public. In public sector, there's at least a little more responsibility with data because of the agencies, the governance. People complain about red tape. There is a need for the red tape in some cases because it's those checks and balances that protect your data. That may not exist in the private sector to the same extent. So be aware of your rights and make sure that you're looking at all of those aspects when you are signing those fine print documents and contracts.
But it goes back to the responsible use of the technology, who's driving the effort for the technology, what is the end game for the technology, because how many technologists are in this room? Maybe. How many of you were Nobel certified back in the early 90s? Yeah, I was Nobel certified. Who cares anymore, right? That went away. That used to be a big deal, right? If those of you who remember that. We were definitely afraid when Token Ring went away and went to TCP/IP. How can this happen? And what we found out, to Suma's point, is that we found out it was up to us to how we shaped, looked at, and applied that particular technology. And I think that's really the main driver behind the privacy piece of this.
Perhaps AI is the solution. I mean, how many of you read every line of the user agreement that you sign every time you download an app? But perhaps there is an AI app that can summarize for you the 5 key provisions that you're signing off on, right? And that would be an app that would potentially help all of us say, do I want to sign off on this or not, right, before I download this thing? I'm just imagining here, folks. I don't know that I can develop one, but the solution might be in technology.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. So do we have time for any more questions? One more? One more. Okay, we have one more.
I think the most impactful thing from this conversation was what you said about the need for others who are not in the technology industry to inform and direct the use of AI. And I couldn't agree more. But at the same time, I can't think of a way to effectively do that. What are ways that artists, teachers, creators, writers, how can we get our voices out so that AI represents everybody, as you said?
No, that's a great question, right? You have to have a coalition of those non-technical people and make sure there's a forum for you to engage, right? Whether it's with Facebook, I mean, we put photos of ourselves on Facebook. We don't know what happens, but anytime you say, hey, I want to go on vacation with your spouse or someone, it automatically generates ads, right? It is scary what happens. So I think it's very important to engage in forums where, just the, not just the technical people are shaping the policies and how the data is being shared. There needs to be like some place where we all get together and get to those perspectives. It's been ignored for way too long, and that's why we are in such a big place where we don't know what's happening to our data. And that's a scary place.
Okay, with that, I want to give our panelists a huge round of applause for some really great ideas and thoughts.